Okay, let's get straight to the point this time. No fancy montage needed. Mortimer Freeze is the second boss of Cuphead's hardest mod that I managed to S-rank, so I'm going to cover my strategies on how to beat him in this video. This is, of course, a part of my ongoing series where I explain each boss of the DLC SOUPED mod in full detail, so you should check out the first video if you haven't already. No, seriously, that video goes over some really important changes and mechanics that I won't be discussing here, so you should really watch it first if you haven't already. Still with me? Good. Now let's beat another snow-related old guy. Mortimer Freeze is a fairly unique boss in Cuphead's base game, being a boss that actively switches which side of the screen he's on, as well as transitioning between two different arena layouts. That being said, it is fairly easy to dish out massive damage during all of his phases, which makes the fight very short. As a result, the first and most impactful change done to this fight by Morris and Jack is the increased HP. Mortimer has a total of 3000 HP, which is the most out of any land boss in this mod. Combo this with the insane attacks that Mortimer can perform, and you've got a fight that is both lengthy and deadly. When choosing weapons, we consider damage first and foremost for this fight. The clear superior choice here is Spread, as it's the most powerful weapon in the game at the cost of having a shorter range. A great option to pick when dishing out damage while not having to worry about attacks. Charge and Roundabout are good options for your second shot, serving to deal acceptable damage when Spread isn't all too useful. Both have their pros and cons, with Charge being more suitable for the first phase and Roundabout being better for the second phase. I personally prefer to run Roundabout, but ultimately the choice is up to you. P-Shooter and Converge are just worse roundabouts, Lobber is only really good for one phase, and Twist Up's only benefit is its high damage EX. Chaser and Crackshot are unusable, don't consider these weapons at all. For charms, you have a few more options. The first phase of the fight relies heavily on restricting the player's movement options while on the ground, so any charm that helps your mobility while in the air, such as Smoke Bomb, Chalice, and Whetstone are great here. I choose to run Whetstone for its additional damage, but Chalice also helps a ton for phase 3. Heart and Twin Heart are also good options when starting out, but should really be swapped out when you get the hang of things. P-Sugar, Heart Ring, and Divine Relic have no real purpose in this fight. All three supers are okay for this fight, but Cuphead's Invincibility super allows you to completely avoid a difficult attack during phase 3, so I recommend picking that one. At the end of the day, my loadout was Roundabout Spread, Super 2, and Whetstone, but know that unlike Glumpstone, there are a lot more options to choose from when tackling Mortimer Freeze. If my particular loadout doesn't work for you, feel free to change it. Now let's dive into the fight. The fight begins with Mortimer flying from side to side at the top of the screen. He moves much faster in this mod, so it's difficult to hit him with any weapon besides Charge. Mortimer does stop moving for 2 of his attacks, which is where you can get most of your damage from, but you'll have to avoid being greedy so as to not get whaled. Mortimer's most common and most problematic attack is the Icicle attack, where he spawns 4 icicles that somewhat home in on the player before becoming stuck in the ground. They then free themselves and begin chasing the player. These icicles are impervious while in the air, but they can be killed while on the ground. However, each icicle has been buffed to have a high amount of HP, so you most likely won't be killing all of them before they start chasing you. What's worse is that it's very common for Mortimer to perform 2 of these attacks in a row, leaving the floor practically covered in icicles with no real spots to stand on. There's 2 strategies to go about here, and they're both suboptimal. The first is to shoot the closest icicle you're standing next to in order to give yourself a wider area to stand in, as it becomes much easier to dodge the second icicle attack. The second option is to simply dash away from the area with all the icicles, however this can't be done all the time and leaves you more vulnerable to Mortimer's other 2 attacks. Mortimer's whale attack functions exactly the same in this fight, and it has the unique quirk of being able to kill icicles for you. That's mainly why I prefer to keep standing in the middle of the icicles, as with enough luck Mortimer will kill most of them for me. Mortimer's tarot card attack becomes much more rapid and plentiful. This is where the floor is lava aspect of this phase really comes into play. Or I guess in this case, the floor is ice. Dodging the cards while avoiding all the minions on the ground becomes incredibly risky, so that's why I recommended picking any mobility enhancing charms earlier. Chalice has a double jump, Smoke Bomb lets you dash through the cards, and even the whale, sometimes. And Whetstone can outright one-shot icicles while also giving you another jump. There's also 2 glitches that can occur during this phase to make the fight a bit easier. If the game is paused right as Mortimer starts a tarot card attack, the floating table won't get spawned in and Mortimer won't shoot any cards. This is a frame-perfect trick that is only really viable with the brief parry pauses caused by Whetstone, but it does effectively get rid of an attack. The second glitch occurs randomly, which is when Mortimer just stops attacking for some reason. I don't know if this is a coding oversight or what, but he'll just keep floating from side to side until the phase ends. If this happens, make sure to capitalize off it. With all that said, there's nothing else really to add to this phase. You should be trying to aim at the boss whenever the screen isn't full of attacks, and any straight roundabout or pea-shooter shots will be able to hit him while you're dodging over attacks. I also recommend switching over to spread and killing a nearby icicle minion if you notice that you can't deal sufficient damage to Mortimer. Make sure to switch to a high damaging weapon whenever Mortimer sits still, and this phase should be over in a decent amount of time. Once Mortimer begins transforming into the abominable snowman, he sits completely vulnerable for a few seconds, so you should capitalize on this as much as possible with your current loadout. Once the snowman drops onto the ground, all lingering icicles will be killed instantly, which is nice. Similar to the previous phase, Mortimer's phase 2 has only 3 possible attacks to choose from. Mortimer's rolls are made to be much faster, and his jumps are changed to force the player to duck. He usually chains 1 to 4 of these attacks together, so it's very easy to get overwhelmed. This attack is all about reaction, with Whetstone helping slightly when Mortimer rolls along the ground. Mortimer's slam attack has been changed to activate both faster and with more swords coming out of the ground. Standing in between the swords is practically impossible now, so your best bet is to stall out the swords while in the air, which is yet another reason why aerial charms are so good here. This can be done in a number of ways, such as an EX stall, a chalice double jump, a Whetstone parry off Mortimer's face, or just a precise jump and dash. Mortimer's fridge attack is the most problematic, with Mortimer now spawning many more ice cubes at a much faster rate. He also summons much more popsicles that will linger throughout the rest of the phase. This attack is where Super 2 really shines, as when timed right, you can dodge the attack altogether while dealing free damage. However, phase 2 lasts just long enough for Mortimer to use 2 fridge attacks, so you'll still have to dodge the ice cubes at least once to stay completely safe. What I like to do is bait out the ice cubes in a similar fashion to the gnome spikes in Glumstone's phase 1, with me slowly walking to the other side of the screen just out of reach from the breaking ice cubes. Once I'm at the edge of the screen, I try to find an opening when the 2 closest ice cubes are both breaking apart above the floor, which is when I dash to the other side to avoid the last incoming ice blocks. This dodge can be performed in a number of ways, such as going over the ice cubes instead of under, but both ways are equally stressful. The last part of this phase that I have yet to cover are the lingering popsicle minions. Mortimer summons a bunch of them at the end of his previous fridge attack, and they swoop down towards the center almost constantly throughout the rest of the phase. Your dodging patterns for Mortimer's attacks are going to have to be improvised so as to avoid them. Ducking while dodging Mortimer's dodge rolls can leave you completely vulnerable to a popsicle, so I suggest either killing them ahead of time or ducking closer to the edges of the screen, as the popsicles only really reach the floor near the center of the arena. The popsicles can be parried off of with Whetstone during the ground slam attack. They can also get in the way while strafing to avoid the ice cubes, so use your high damage weapon to kill them without having to stop for too long. When going for the S rank, I prefer to stop shooting whenever I see a pink popsicle to get my parries safely. I do the same during the ground slam attack to give me more dodging opportunities. As stated previously, the phase should last long enough for Mortimer to perform 2 separate fridge attacks, so use this to predict when phase 3 is about to begin. Make sure to save most of your cards for this phase. Similar to last time, the snowman's transformation takes a short while to play out, so use this time to get as much damage as possible. The screen only begins auto-scrolling up when you jump on a platform, so you should be good to deal as much damage as you want. The third phase receives by far the biggest buff, with all of Mortimer's attacks becoming insanely fast along with some detrimental arena changes. One of the 5 floating platforms is removed, and the platforms now rotate at a much faster rate. They can be rotating either clockwise or counterclockwise once the phase begins. Yes, this is important to know for later. When starting out, you'll likely struggle to dodge any attack just by virtue of the platforms moving so fast, so getting used to them is your top priority. To stand in one spot while dealing damage, make sure to either walk off the platforms or jump up them, depending on their rotation. When dodging attacks, try to stay in the air as much as possible, as the platforms can move you into attacks in unpredictable ways. Yet again, why an aerial loadout is the best for this fight. Mortimer's eye attack has been insanely buffed, with the eye now summoning a vertical beam of energy every 7 frames or so. Needless to say, dodging this while staying on the platforms is next to impossible, so you have to think outside the box. The eye never reaches the edges of the arena, so that's where you should be in order to dodge the attack. Problem is, the platforms never reach there either, so some stalling needs to be performed, either with an EX, double jump, or a wet parry. Dodging the eye on the same side as Mortimer forces you to dodge the eyeball twice, both when Mortimer begins the attack and when he swallows it up. However, it's ultimately a much easier dodge than doing it on the other side of the arena and lets you get more damage off. The snow cone attack is where the rotating platforms really come into play, as standing still for even a brief second will move you right into one of the snow cones. The cones begin moving in a straight line once they are summoned, with it being up to RNG whether the bottom snow cones or the top snow cones begin moving first. To dodge this, I dash over to the boss and perform a whetstone parry to see which snow cone begins moving first, as standing still in an empty spot can be bad depending on whether you're expecting the snow cone to leave or not. Once I see which snow cone moved first, I go back to my original spot. From there, I need to find an opening through the incoming snow cones, which can be done easier with yet another whetstone parry and dash through the gaps. Now onto the last and worst attack of this phase, and probably the hardest individual attack to dodge in this mod, the bucket attack. Basically everything regarding this attack has been buffed to an unreasonable degree. There's more buckets, they fly faster, and, most notably, their explosions cover the entire screen with projectiles. I'm gonna be honest, there's no real strategy for dodging this attack. You just have to get really good at dodging on the platforms. You should be staying in one spot as much as possible, and your dodging patterns will change depending on the rotation of the platforms. When moving forward against the platforms, you should jump back through a gap in the direction of the explosion, but you should also avoid moving too far back so you're able to land on an incoming platform. When moving with the platforms, try to time your jump onto another platform along with a jump through a gap. That's the phase down, or at least it would be if Mortimer didn't have some more magic tricks up his sleeve.
Magic.
After each attack, Mortimer has a chance to swap to a different side of the arena, along with being able to turn upside down. The eyeball and snow cone attacks stay relatively the same when Mortimer is upside down, but the bucket attacks becomes nearly impossible to dodge. The buckets now shoot out from the top half of the screen instead of the bottom half, which is where we usually stand to deal damage. When you see this happening, move to the lower half of the screen and try to stay in one spot for as long as possible. You can perform some tight jumps in between moons once Mortimer stops shooting out buckets, but I usually never go for that. Instead, I would just use my invincibility super whenever I see this attack combo, as it gives me the most reliable way of avoiding damage. Mortimer is also sometimes able to overlap an eyeball or snow cone attack with the lingering moon projectiles, which becomes fairly tricky to dodge. If Mortimer starts his eyeball attack, move towards the boss and then stall out the attack starting animation while staying on the boss's hitbox. Afterwards, you can dash through the remaining moon gaps, making sure your dash lands you on a platform. If Mortimer starts a snow cone attack, do the same thing, except time your last dash through a gap in the snow cones as well. Mortimer can also do this right after switching sides, so in that case you should follow him by dashing through the moon gaps while staying on the platforms to resume dodging his attack normally. The last phase lasts long enough for Mortimer to perform at least 2 bucket attacks, usually one right side up and the other upside down, so save your super for the upside down variation. Mortimer's body doesn't have a hitbox, so you can deal as much damage as you want when staying up close, which should be most if not all the time. With enough damage and admittedly luck, the phase should end, earning you the victory. Alright, that's it for the strategy guide. As always, there's a lot of minor dodges and optimizations that I didn't go over, as they're incredibly niche and pretty self-explanatory. Mortimer is also a much easier boss than Glumstone, so you shouldn't have too much trouble beating him if you've already cleared Glumstone. As always, go support the original mod creator Morrison Jack. He's done an outstanding job so far with this mod, and he could use the support. Sorry for the long gap between the last video, by the way. It's been what, 2 or 3 months since the Glumstone video? Yeah, that's kind of to be expected from my channel if I'm being honest. The next video will be covering Howling Aces, which is by far the hardest boss in this mod, so it'll probably take even longer to come out, I don't even know. So if you don't want to miss it, make sure to subscribe. Go do it. There's nothing else left to do in this video, so just go subscribe. Or watch one of these other videos, they're pretty cool too.